Today, I'm going to help you find the perfect tent for your solo backpacking trips. Most people will prioritize a 2-person tent as their first backpacking tent, but having a good solo tent can help you save space and weight in your pack while potentially being easier to set up and allow you to set up in tighter spaces. I've tested dozens of 1-person tents and found the best options in 5 different categories: ultralight, budget, freestanding, the best all-arounder, and then the best tent for winter conditions. Starting off with the award for the best ultralight tent, we have the Z-Packs Plex Solo Light. Obviously, the priority for this category was weight, but I also wanted a tent that was going to be spacious enough that you could spend some time inside of it if it was raining, but also easy to use. The standout features with the Plex Solo Light is that it's a lot more storm-worthy than a lot of people probably give it credit for. I've had tents in this kind of style out in insane wind, tons of rain, and they've held up really well. I also find these style of tents really easy to set up. It probably takes me under 2 minutes to set this tent up. The space inside of it is perfect for me at 5'10", 180 pounds. If you're over 6'2", then you're probably gonna start to feel a little bit cramped in the Plex Solo. But if you're under 6 foot, then it's gonna feel really roomy. In addition to the weight savings that the Dyneema material that this tent's made out of provide, it also is my favorite material because it doesn't absorb any water, which makes it really easy to wipe down condensation off the inside or rain off the outside, which makes it so you're not carrying any water weight if you're dealing with a lot of condensation or rain. For each category, I'm also gonna go over one bad thing, and with the Plex Solo Light, that is the space. While it is roomy enough for me, if you are on the bigger side or if you're claustrophobic, then it's not going to be a ton of space. Like, I have enough room inside this tent in order to get changed and kind of move around a little bit, but it's not a big tent by any means. The kind of trip where people are going to probably really enjoy a tent like the Plex Solo is if you're doing like a fast packing trip. It's a very compact tent as well, so if you're using a fast packing pack, then it's going to fit inside there. Or if you're going on a through hike where you're doing mile after mile and you're really prioritizing the hiking and you want a tent that's not going to be a lot of weight inside your pack. An alternative to the Plex Solo is the Durson X-Mid 2. It's not a 1-person tent, but it addresses that flaw with the Plex Solo, which is size. The X-Mid Pro 2, because it's a 2-person tent, is just going to have a lot more room inside of it. My guess is that for the big through hikes like the Pacific Crest Trail and the CDT, that the X-Mid Pro 2 is probably going to be the most popular tent for the next several years. The best budget tent is an oldie but a goodie. It's the 3F UL Lanshan 1. This is the non-pro version. The priorities for the budget category were obviously price, but I also wanted something that was going to be easy to use for newer backpackers and still be comfortable while you're out on trail. I also wanted it to be reliable, which the Lanshan 1 is. A lot of people have used this tent for many years. It's a very similar tent to the Plex Solo in that it's a non-freestanding tent, so you have to have one trekking pole up the middle of the tent in order to provide structural support. And then it's also very easy to set up because of that. Like I said, this is the easiest style of tent for me to set up. I can do it very quickly. The standout features for this tent are price and then weight. It only weighs 790 grams and comes in at a price around $100, just slightly over. You can get it on sale for about $100 quite often. It's also a double wall tent, which is not necessarily something that I enjoy, but I know for a lot of people out there, they like to have that physical barrier between themselves and the fly. So if there is condensation on the fly, then they have a little bit of protection. Personally, I like to be able to wipe off the fly if I do get condensation on it, like I mentioned with the Plex Solo. I think this is a great option for a lot of people to have if they're not getting out on a ton of solo trips, but get out on solo trips every once in a while and want to save some weight and have a little bit more of a compact tent. This tent is just in a bigger stuff sack, 10 liters, but it compresses a lot smaller. There's quite a few alternatives in this category, but a lot of them are going to weigh a little bit more, like the Nature Hike Tagar tent or the Nature Hike Cloud Up tents. But I think if you're going to spend a little bit more money for an alternative, then the 6 Moon Designs Lunar Solo is a great option. It's about double the price of the Lanshan 1, but it's a little bit more roomy and it uses a sil poly material for the fly, which is, in my opinion, a lot better than the sil nylon material that the Lanshan 1 uses. The award for the best freestanding tent is pretty much a toss-up between this tent and then the alternative, and I went back and forth between choosing which one was going to be the winner, but it ended up going to the Marmot Tungsten UL 1P tent, and this might flip-flop. I might go back and forth with what I think depending on the conditions that I'm going out in, but because of price, I went with this tent. The priority for this category is that the tent had to be able to get set up without using any tent stakes and then be able to kind of move it around if you needed to, and then it had to be just a generally good all-around tent. I also like that 1-person freestanding tents generally have a smaller footprint than their non-freestanding brothers like the Lanshan 1 and the Plex Solo. The standout features with the Tungsten UL are that it uses a sil poly fly, which is not going to absorb as much water as sil nylon flies and isn't going to sag when it's wet. It's a great weight for its size as well at under 1 kilogram, And if you're around 6 foot to 6'3", you're gonna fit inside this tent no problem. It has solid ventilation because of a vent in the fly, and then a lot of mesh used. And then, like I said, a pretty small footprint. The one bad thing with freestanding tents, and this is something that I hope they address at some point in the future, is that they don't have an all-in-one or fly first pitch. So you have to pitch the inner tent first and then put the fly on top of it. And if it's raining out, that means that the inner tent is getting all wet before you can get the fly on. The kind of trips where I'm using a freestanding tent are those where I'm on sand or kind of rocky areas where getting tent stakes into the ground is a little bit more difficult. And I'd take a one-person tent in those kind of conditions when I'm gonna be setting up in tighter spaces. An alternative freestanding tent, and like I said, the award could have easily gone to this tent, is the Nemo Dragonfly one person. I packed the tent poles in both of these tents. That's why they seem a little bit bulky. They definitely compress to about half the size if you take the tent poles out. This tent has a lot of the same benefits as the Tungsten UL. It doesn't have a silk poly fly, but it uses Nemo's Osmo fabric for the fly, which has a lot of the same properties as silk poly because it uses some polyester in its composition. Where the Dragonfly kind of stands apart is that it's going to be a little bit lighter, more expensive, but then also probably better in weather. I haven't had either tent in really bad weather, but there's a lot more stakeout points and guy out points with the Dragonfly, and it has a profile that's probably gonna shed wind a little bit better. The Nemo Dragonfly probably could have won this next category, the best all-around one-person tent, but I gave it to a non-freestanding tent, a tent that needs a trekking pole, because I just wanted that extra bit of weight savings, and the award goes to the Six Moon Designs Lunar Solo. This tent won because of the priorities that it addresses of weight, ease of use, performance in weather, cost, and weight. The Lunar Solo only costs $260, which makes it very affordable. It only weighs 740 grams and is quite spacious. It has a very wide floor, so if you are going on a solo trip, you can bring a really wide sleeping pad and even have a lot of room beside you to bring a pet or store all your gear in the tent with you. Some other standout features is that it uses silk poly for the fly material, so you're getting all the benefits of polyester flies. And then it also has a very innovative door that allows you to kind of slide the door a little bit higher and lower along the guy line in order to increase ventilation and maybe even provide a little bit of a view in order to watch the sunrise or sunset. The one bad thing with the Lunar Solo is that you do have to seam seal it yourself. Because it's the best all-arounder tent, I think that it's good for pretty much any kind of trip that you're going to be going on as a solo adventure. It's just great all-around tent. For those of you who are thinking that the Lunar Solo is a little bit small still for you, then the alternative as the best all-arounder is a two-person tent again. It's the Durson X Mid 2, so this is the non-pro version, so it's quite a bit less expensive than the Dyneema Pro version, but a little bit heavier. It also has a double wall to it, so you get all the benefits of that, and is super spacious inside. It's also a very lightweight tent, still at 1,000 grams, and if you pick this tent up, it's gonna be your best all-around tent for any scenario, even if you're going out with other people. It's a great two-person tent and a great solo tent. Before we get into the best winter tent, this tent's super cool. If you're interested in any of the tents that I'm talking about today, I'll have links in the description so you can go check them out. I get a small commission if you end up picking up one of the tents at no extra cost to you, and it really helps out the channel. The best winter tent is the Samaya 2.0. A lot of people have probably never heard of this brand before, but they make ultralight tents out of Dyneema, but that are extremely stormworthy. That was one of my priorities for this category. I wanted the tent to be stormworthy. I also wanted it to be relatively roomy inside in case I had to hunker down during a storm, and then I want it to be fairly lightweight. It's really difficult to actually find a tent that ticks all of those boxes. But the Samaya 2.0 does. It's an amazing tent. I used it a lot this past winter as my go-to winter tent, and it was nice to have a freestanding tent in order to set up on kind of more granular, sugary snow. I didn't have to kind of wait an hour, 2 hours for it to solidify, and it just made it a lot quicker to set up camp. I love that the Samaya is just over 1,300 grams for an insanely storm-worthy tent, and then it's very roomy inside for one person. It's advertised as a two-person tent, but you're gonna have to be pretty cozy with the person that you're on a trip with if you're gonna use it in that capacity. The one downside with this tent is that it's very expensive at $1,100. So it's by far the most expensive tent on this list, but if you want a tent that's going to be ultralight, spacious, and stormworthy, then there's not a ton of options out there. If you're more interested in two-person tents, go check out this video where I talk about the best two-person tents in case you want to go backpacking with a friend or a furry friend, or just want to go have a lot more room in the tent with you if you're a solo backpacker.